Welcome to Dharma Talk. My name is Matthew Sokolov, the teacher here at One Mind Dharma. And if you're joining us, whether it's on video or the audio podcast, welcome. You can always visit oneminddharma.com/talk, where we have all of the links to subscribe via email or iTunes or Google Play. You can also find the YouTube videos if you want to watch in video format, or just subscribe to the audio. We'll also have a link. We're going to start eventually live streaming these, as a few people have asked for us to do so, and the opportunity to kind of interact in live time when questions come up. So all of that information will be there. There's also a link there to support this podcast and donate. One Mind Dharma is supported mainly on donations and support from the community, which allows for me to do this. You may notice that I'm outside. There's a few reasons I chose to do this. I realized the sound, there may be other sounds going on, but I found the experience of teaching outside, as I do for some of my groups, and being outside to be a little bit more conducive to practice than our relatively dark home, as we live kind of in the jungle and the light doesn't get through all the way. So the first thing I want to mention is that we're going to start doing kind of twice weekly videos and podcast episodes. And one of the reasons for this is that I've had a lot of free time kind of pop up due to some changes in my work and Elizabeth's work and what that looks like. So if you have a topic, we're going to be pushing out 2 talks a week. That's a lot of content, and I run out of ideas sometimes. So if you have something that you want me to talk about or you want me to cover, send me an email. It's matthew@oneminddharma.com. I answer every single email that comes into me. And I'm always happy to talk about something that's salient and relevant to you. The last thing I want to throw out there is, if this topic that we're going to talk about today is something that interests you, we have a new course coming out called An Introduction to Buddhism. And I've worked super hard on it. Elizabeth's worked super hard on it. It's our most kind of well put together course that we've done yet. It has, I don't even know how many hours or minutes of videos, but I think about like 35, 40 video lessons. It has a ton of external resources. And we go through everything from kind of the history of Buddhism, the Buddha's life, early Buddhism, all the way through to how it spread to the West, the basic teachings, and incorporating it into our daily lives. And this is kind of one of my passions. I love talking about mindfulness and compassion and whatnot. But I also think it's important to understand the history of our teachings and kind of the framework and the culture and the framework from which they come. So you can learn more about that at oneminddharma.com/learn. I'm super excited for it. We're offering it for just $5 to launch, to try to see what people think and get some thoughts. So if you're interested in supporting us in that way and learning a little bit, we would greatly appreciate it, and hopefully it's useful. So with all of that out of the way, today I wanted to talk a little bit about a topic that's come up with a few students of mine that I meet with one-on-one. And that's the topic of karma, and how it's kind of it's not the easiest concept for some people to grab onto. Like, many of us can attach to the idea that like compassion and caring for the suffering is truly a good and useful quality. Whereas karma is a little bit, there's a little bit more hesitation among many people in the West about just taking this idea of rebirth and karma as true. And I'm not going to sit here, in case you're feeling like you should shut off this episode, I'm absolutely not going to sit here and tell you that you should believe in karma or rebirth. But I just want to outline the teachings and my own experience with it. I have my notes down here just until I figure out a better way to keep my notes on me. So we'll start with the idea of samsara, of rebirth. And this is really a central piece to Buddhist teachings. It's something that I think gets left out in the West quite a bit. We kind of ignore it, or maybe don't teach about it that much. Even going to the meditation centers I've gone to, Spirit Rock or Against the Stream or Inside LA, you just don't hear about it that much, and it's not something that's really emphasized, whereas it is kind of a core teaching of the Buddhas. The idea of samsara is that we're in a cycle of death and rebirth over and over again, and that's suffering. Nirvana, on the other hand, or full awakening, is relief from this cycle, escape from the cycle of samsara, as it's often called. The Thai forest monk Ajahn Chah says, "Why are we born? We're born so we don't have to be born again." This is part of the teaching of samsara, that we have the opportunity to escape this cycle, to break free from it, and achieve full awakening. I think this can be a hard teaching, especially for people that come from other religious backgrounds or experiences. I know at the One Mind Dharma Center in Petaluma, we had many people sit with us who had other religious beliefs or were actively religious in another tradition. And I think that the idea of samsara can be especially hard with this. But I love the teaching of Ajahn Amaro, which is just to keep it as a working hypothesis. We don't need to believe it fully. We don't need to take it as gospel or build our lives around it just yet. But if you're skeptical about this idea of rebirth, just keep it as a working hypothesis. I'll talk towards the end about my own personal beliefs just for what they're worth. Not that I think I'm right and you're wrong if you believe something different, but I do want to share with some transparency where I'm at with these teachings. I personally do keep it as like a working hypothesis, and I think that's a great piece of advice. It was Voltaire that said something along the lines of, is it not more surprising, it's not any more surprising to be born twice than it is to be born once. And I remember reading that or hearing it in some sort of Dharma talk, and of course he's not a Buddhist teacher, but I remember hearing that, and that was kind of where I began keeping it as a working hypothesis. That it's true. It's not any crazier to be born twice than it is the fact that we were born once. But that basic idea of samsara is very important to Buddhism. One of the things that drives samsara is the creation of karma. And this is a word that is so charged and so misunderstood. So I really want to kind of break it down in what it is. In Pali, it's kama, so you may see it written like that. And that's kind of, Pali is the language of the tradition that I follow. However, karma is the Sanskrit word, and obviously the more commonly used word. So, pardon my dog jumping in the pool behind me. She is chasing sticks. The idea of karma, as it's used in the suttas, isn't just the word karma. It's often used in conjunction with this word vipaka, kama vipaka. And what it actually means is action and effect. So that's all that the word kama means, is intentional action. We make up all these stories about it, or kind of think we have this vision of what it looks like. And really all it means is intentional action. We can overcomplicate it all we want, but that's what it means. Karma is a principle in Buddhism, in Hinduism, of course, in Jainism, Shintoism, Taoism, which may have had some influence from Buddhism, and vice versa, of course. And it's different in all these traditions, and I don't want to speak to what karma is in any of these other traditions or religions or philosophies, just because I don't know, and I didn't take the time to research it in depth. So I don't want to talk about something about which I know very little. I do know in Buddhism, and from teaching for years, that one of the most common misconceptions people tend to have about karma, as far as the Dharma goes, is that there's some sort of tally being kept. That we have, good karma and bad karma, and it's like on a scale, or someone's keeping tally. Or maybe the idea that any action could be good karma or bad karma. Both of those ideas are incorrect as far as Buddhism is concerned. That's simply not how karma works. I think one of the greatest examples that I've had in my own life was I used to just lie a lot about everything. It was part of kind of the addictive behavior and the hiding and not wanting to be seen, and just kind of general dishonesty, even beyond my words, of who I was and how I was living. And when I lie to someone, whether it's a white lie or like a total blatant harmful lie, the teaching on karma isn't that means someone else is going to lie to me. And we've heard that. I mean, I know I have, where someone says, oh, I got cut off in traffic, but I guess it's my karma because I cut someone off last week. That's not how it works. That may be an interesting coincidence and that may happen, but that's just not the teaching of karma. Instead, going back to the lying, it's not necessarily that someone's going to lie back to me because I lied to someone, but instead the karma or the consequences that I deal with from that action, maybe that I have difficulty sleeping, maybe literally, maybe more figuratively, but it weighs on my conscience. I feel some guilt perhaps. Maybe I do things to cope with that guilt, like drugs or alcohol or other harmful behaviors. Maybe I just have to suffer with the guilt, which we've all kind of done. We've done something and then just had to really sit with the guilt. Maybe I'm creating dishonest relationships when I do that. I mean, I definitely am. But hypothetically, when we lie, we're creating dishonest relationships where we're not honest with someone else, and maybe we stop feeling like they're being honest with us because we're lying. So that's how karma works. There's consequences to our actions. It's not necessarily that someone's going to lie back to us. It's not this tally. Specifically, the word karma means intentional actions, actions that we take with intent. And I think that can be a sticking point, because if you're, walking into a movie theater and you accidentally step on somebody's toe, that wasn't intentional in this situation. Maybe you do that intentionally sometimes. But if that wasn't intentional, is that creating karma, yes or no? I don't think the answer is as simple as, oh, it was not intentional, therefore there's no karma involved. I think we can find some solace in that we didn't do it on purpose, we didn't do something knowingly, is way different than doing something with intention. And at the same time recognizing that intention and impact aren't necessarily the same thing, of course. On the other hand, there's the fact that had we been walking more mindfully, we might not have stepped on that person's toe. Now granted, you don't need to pick apart every little situation in your life. You don't need to beat yourself up every time you do something on accident. But we can kind of look at it for a brief moment and just reflect, oh, maybe I could be more mindful next time. Not to take all the blame like we're so bad. You can understand that it wasn't an intentional action, but we also weren't intentionally walking mindfully. So there are really two pieces there to consider. I like I think that it illustrates how important karma is to Buddhism, that the Dhammapada, this is one translation of it by Ajahn Lee. This is one translation of it by Ajahn Munindo. And there's many translations, but it's kind of a book of prose, or I'm not sure what you call it, supposedly of words of the Buddha. And it's, I don't want to say one of the most important kind of collections, but it is an often cited collection. And it's this whole book with different teachings in it. There's over 400 verses. And the first two are, all states of being are determined by mind. It is mind that leads the way. Just as the wheel of the ox cart follows the hoof print of the animal that draws it, so suffering will surely follow when we speak or act impulsively from an impure state of mind. All states of being are determined by mind. It is mind that leads the way. As surely as our shadow never leaves us, so well-being will follow when we speak or act with a pure state of mind. So right from the beginning of this book of teachings is this emphasis on karma, this emphasis on when we act skillfully, well-being comes, and when we act unskillfully, suffering comes. The words in this translation is impulsively or out of purity. But I love the images as the ox cart follows the hooves, or as a shadow never leaves us. You can see the water splashing around from the dog. So I really think that this emphasizes the importance of karma. One of the interesting things, it was asked to me years ago when I was like, I probably shouldn't have been answering questions as a meditation teacher even. I was just leading a sitting group, and we had a discussion. It wasn't really me as a teacher, more of a facilitator. But somebody asked, what do you do with, how does karma work when somebody's caused their own suffering, or somebody's kind of struggling in some way because of their own suffering, or they've caused harm to others, but you have an opportunity to help them? So I think a great example is somebody who maybe, for example, robs someone or engages in some sort of theft of money or goods, and then they're in trouble. And let's say it's a family member. They get in trouble and they're really suffering. They're in jail perhaps, or have been arrested. We understand that their karma is their karma and can look at equanimity, but where's kind of the skillful action as far as karma goes for us in that moment? And it was a question that I received, and the person was going through some things with a family member that really made me think. And it was years later that I came across a quote from Tom Jeff that was just crystal clear about it. He says, if you see that other people are suffering and you're in a position to help, you focus not on their karmic past, but your karmic opportunity in this present moment. And he just leaves it at that you have a karmic opportunity to help. It doesn't mean we have to enable, it doesn't mean we have to condone any behavior, but can we support or be loving in whatever way that looks when somebody's really struggling? Karma at its simplest is this idea that what we do has a consequence. And we can overcomplicate it so many ways, but just think back to this intentional action and a consequence. And consequence doesn't have to be, that kind of has a negative connotation, like, oh, consequences. But you can think of it as, I often say, karma is the law of cause and effect. That's a common translation or way that it's described in English. And I find that to be incredibly useful and on point. Another way I've heard karma described is the law that the choices we make today will dictate the choices we have in the future. An interesting way to look at it, and just as true, that we can look at it kind of from the skillful and unskillful or suffering side. If we choose to cause harm to someone intentionally, like we want revenge and we choose to get revenge, we have to deal with the consequences of that. We might find ourselves, in legal trouble. Our reputation might be hurt. We deal with suffering. We're causing suffering on someone else, and knowing that causes guilt. And of course, we're strengthening that kind of rut in our brain that's how we act. And on the other side, we have the karma of something like practice. When we sit in meditation every day, the consequences of that are that we're more mindful during everyday life, that it often becomes easier to sit every day. Maybe we're more compassionate or have a little bit more patience. So karma, really does go both ways. And I just, as a reminder, it's not black and white. It's not this is good and this is bad, or even skillful and unskillful, or good karma, bad karma kind of thing. I know I just gave an example in two directions, making it really binary. But it's important to see that the consequences of our actions may be a direction, but it's not necessarily so linear as we want to make it. It may not necessarily even be a spectrum. It may go in multiple directions. So great. We got these teachings, not great like we understand it completely now necessarily, but we have these teachings and some understanding of what the Buddha said. One piece I left out is that as far as samsara goes, our karma from past lives affects our lives and rebirth today. So that's how it really relates to samsara. The way that we really kind of cleanse our karma is through practice and reaching nirvana, and that frees us from creating karma to be reborn. And that's the core of the Buddha's teachings right there. It's not something we talk about in the West. It's not something, you hear in MBSR practices or many meditation circles, but like that really is, in many traditions, the core of practice is to cleanse our karma. I don't know if cleanse is the right word. It's often cleanse or purify, two words which I'm not crazy about either. But to stop creating karma and to escape from this cycle. So I want to talk about what it actually means, all of this kind of means, as far as pragmatic instruction goes, or how we can incorporate it into our daily life, because it's one of the problems I see quite a bit where people, I go to Dharma talks, or I listen to a lot of Dharma talks now that I live not in the United States, but they give a great talk on a topic that I knew nothing or little about, and it's just the teachings in the Dharma, and it's so interesting, and I'm kind of left by myself to investigate what it means to incorporate that into my practice or begin investigating it. I think that's the beauty of the Buddha's teachings, is that we can do that. But as far as practice goes, I want to offer a few things, ways that we can utilize our understanding of karma and work towards creating karma that leads to freedom and not suffering. First, of course, there's mindfulness meditation. We've talked about this a lot. My dog just walked by with a deflated basketball. We've talked about this. I talk about this a lot. If you've been subscribing to Dharma Talk, or if you come to our online group, or if you read our blog at all, you know that I'm very adamant about teaching what mindfulness is. It's not just being present. That's absurd. If mindfulness was just being present, my dog would be a fully awakened Buddha. And maybe she is. I don't want to put her down, but I don't think so. Half of mindfulness is being present, and the other half is recognition. And the Buddha talks about this in many suttas, including the Satipatthana Sutta. And the word sati that we translate as mindfulness means recognition or remembering, not mindfulness or presence. So this recognition piece is we can be present for something and recognize whether it's leading to suffering or to liberation. So a simple kind of example is, I often use it, so I apologize if you've heard it before, is if someone says something really harmful to me for whatever reason, whatever they say, and I recognize that it hurts and I want to punch them in the face, that's being present, right? Like I'm presently knowing that I want to punch this person in the face. If I punch that person in the face while being present, is that mindful? Of course it's not. So the mindfulness piece there is recognizing that that's an unskillful behavior. Recognizing that if I do that, it's going to lead to suffering in myself and in the other person. I think that this is a piece that's often left out in many teachings, that we need to see before we act, is this going to lead to suffering or to liberation? Or is it going to lead to a healthy relationship or an unhealthy one? Or is it going to lead to more kindness toward myself or more harshness? And we can see it internally. When we're meditating and we're doing a concentration practice and the mind wanders off and we kind of grab it and bring it back and judge ourselves, we can recognize in that moment that's not a healthy or helpful way to respond. So there's this piece of working with karma of really focusing on the recognition piece. Is what we're experiencing or what we want to do, I hate to break it down to be too simple, but helping or hurting. You can just take it as that. In recovery communities, they often say, is it leading to recovery or relapse? suffering or liberation. So we can look at it any of these ways. But being present and really tuning into the recognition piece, because that's karma. We're recognizing the consequences of our actions. The other thing that we can do in daily life is really take the practice of pausing seriously and taking a moment to recognize whether something's leading to suffering or to liberation. I use the practice of awareness triggers. I've talked about this a lot as well, of just picking one kind of experience that happens throughout your day to really pause and check in. You can use the sound of a phone ringing or vibrating. You can use the act of walking through a door, whether it's a door to a home or another room or a car. You can use the act of changing posture, so going from sitting to standing or sitting to lying down. And anytime, just pick one event. Maybe work with it for a couple days or a week. And anytime this event happens, pause and just check in with what's going on and see if you can recognize some karma. There may not be a ton happening or a ton present that you're aware of, but these awareness triggers are a great way to really kind of check in and come back to where you are.